I don't need it.
You don't need to say.
26 of 27. I want to thank you all for still being here. So I'd like to talk with you today about radical leaps of faith. Not piddling little leaps of faith like believing in a God you can't see or believing that chicken soup will cure your cold. I want to talk about real huge leaps of faith because I believe that radical leaps of faith are the substance of real risk-taking and that real risk-taking leads to real reinvention. Today, I want to talk to you about the value of taking action without known outcomes, of discomfort, of rigorous reflection, and of bold action. I guess for the 6th time today, I'm going to ask you to please close your eyes. No, really do. Please, close your eyes. So imagine what it feels like for a high-wire performer to take that first step off the platform onto the tightrope. That thin strand of wire strung across the topmost beams of a circus tent. Imagine everyone holding their collective breath as that slender figure takes that momentous step from safe ground to the wire. They're hoping she won't fall, although some of them are really hoping she will because everybody loves an unscripted moment. But the audience and the artist all know that this is a rigged game. She's taken a leap, but there's very little risk. She's got a net underneath her. Now, when a Walenda walks from one New York skyscraper to the other New York skyscraper with only New York City traffic underneath them, that is a risk. And if you can imagine that moment when that Walenda takes that first step from concrete onto that thin strand of wire that's the size of a fist, you have to know that that is a huge, radical leap of faith. Now, imagine when that first Walenda, the first guy who figured out that this was a great way to make a living, when he took that first step from that first piece of concrete or stone or whatever the hell it was, and walked out onto that thin strand, he was doing something that no one else had done before. There was risk at stake. That was radical leap of faith. So the difference between operating with and without a net is the difference between real risk and simply a big challenge. Risk-taking isn't a risk if there's nothing at risk. So within the arts community, we talk about risk-taking all the time, and some of us actually believe it. Individual artists, I'd say, often take risks. They start by creating something without knowing what it's going to end up being. They often find midway through that this is something that they can't stand, and they shred the experiment. When it's all done, they put their work out there for the world to the judge. And sometimes the work that they think may be their most defining piece is judged to be banal, insignificant. It can be devastating. It can be devastating both economically and emotionally. Now that is real risk. Institutions, by their very nature, are risk-averse, though. Institutions exist in part to provide that stable environment that sustains artists between their successes and their failures. Institutions are meant to be there for the long haul, and their well-being is governed by trustees whose job it is to hold the organization in trust for future generations. Institutions do not generally place high value on innovation or risk-taking because it's actually antithetical to stability. The nature of boards and the mechanisms by which they provide oversight tend to be cautious. More to the point, they tend to be deliberative. They deliberate. They take the long view. They often keep us out of trouble, but they also deliberate. They constrain. With full appreciation of that responsibility, I'd argue that this often puts innovative institutional leaders in a state of tension with their boards. Tension's not always a bad thing, I might add, but the desire for deliberative movement is often in direct conflict with the opportunistic impulse that leads to full-throttle risk-taking. Now, I don't mean to be hard on institutions because I genuinely believe that they serve an essential purpose in the ecology of an arts community. I've actually chosen to make my career leading institutions, and I will defend their value with gusto. But I think the job of every arts manager and every arts leader who runs an institution is to keep the muscles for risk-taking really well honed. And to hone risk-taking muscles, you have to use those muscles. For an arts institution to be innovative, the leaders of those institutions, I think, have a unique responsibility to create an environment in which risk-taking is the norm. In vital, dynamic arts institutions, arts leaders are valued as agents of change, not as agents of stability. So what are the qualities of a risk-taking organization? I'll start by saying that stability is not a core value, particularly stability at the expense of energy and excitement. So what is? I'd say a willingness to be uncomfortable, a rigorous commitment to self-criticism, a willingness to take action without known outcomes, a culture in which bold behavior is not only recognized but honored. 3 years ago, Berkeley Rep was given an opportunity to buy the original headquarters of the North Face Recreational Equipment Company. It was during the dark days of the recession. Everyone was scaling back. No one was making long-term commitments. And what did we do? We bought 62,000 square feet of office and warehouse space. We signed a 40-year mortgage because that was the only way that we could buy the sucker. Moving into that space was going to split our staff between our theaters and schools in downtown Berkeley, and it was going to bring all of our pre-production facilities under one roof in a location that was 2 miles away. There were so many good things about this move, and so many unnerving ones. We'd not had our whole technical, administrative, and artistic staff in one place since 1982. Wildly different cultures had developed within our different departments. There was actually more room than we knew what we were going to do with in this space, and while it saved us our annual budget by consolidating expenses, it was a huge, huge expense over the long term. So until that point, every single aspect of our theater revolved around our 2 performance spaces. We were performance-driven. This move was going to move 2/3 of our staff 2 miles away from our performance spaces. It was scary. We actually didn't have any idea what we were going to do in that space, and we had an uneasy sense that it was going to radically alter our organizational culture. So we decided to live within the space and not try to immediately mold or shape it, but to let it tell us what it wanted to be. And pretty soon, we realized the space gave us an opportunity to try something that was huge and audacious, something that would have been utterly unimaginable had we not moved into this behemoth in the first place. We looked at the problems that we'd had incubating the new work that we care so much about. We didn't have the room in the past to say yes to projects. We had almost no capacity to open ourselves up to projects that operated outside of our producing norm. We didn't have the money to workshop every project that we cared about. We struggled to build relationships with early career artists. We realized that all of this space gave us an opportunity to solve those problems. But to do so, we had to take that leap of faith without knowing what the outcome might be. Our artistic staff, with a team led by our literary manager, Madeline Oldham, designed our ground floor summer residency lab based on hunches, guesswork, and an impulse to respond to a long simmering need. We decided to throw ourselves fully into this new program without any real sense of what it might become. And within less than a year, we were housing 100 artists, playwrights, actors, dancers, video game designers, you get the picture. Bringing 13 early-stage projects to us in the first year, 16 in the second year, to work with us over 4 weeks, to eat together every single night, to work alone or collaboratively, to engage with our artistic staff or not. We agreed to just see what happened. If it didn't work, we'd have wasted so much money. We'd have frittered away valuable staff time. We'd lose major funding, and Tony Taccone, our artistic director, and I would have very public egg on our faces. But if it succeeded, we would have become a very different institution. After the first year, we engaged in some serious soul-searching. There were unquestionably things that didn't work and areas where we fell way short, but there were also some real successes. We were very excited about those successes. We're now entering our third year. We've been scrupulously self-critical. We've made ourselves extremely uncomfortable. We've lived with substantial uncertainty, and our entire organization has recognized, and I would like to think we've honored, the bold and transformative program that Madeline has so carefully fostered. I can now say that we are a very different institution. We have indeed experienced the cultural shift that we had wanted and feared. We are now as focused on the development of new work as we are on producing new work. We've experienced a shift in priorities. We found that our staff, and this is not age-specific, struggled with the unsettled nature of this new challenge. They would have much preferred clarity and boundaries, which we were unwilling to establish. They looked for patterns that couldn't be found. It was stressful for our staff to be asked to work in new and uncharted territory. This was not the first time we'd asked them to work this way. Over many years, the early adopters have gained value. The fence-sitters have generally come on board. And the naysayers, well, they've mostly left. Nonetheless, the anxiety of the staff was something we had to reckon with. The board was an equally difficult challenge. When we threw ourselves into the ground floor initiative, Tony felt such a certainty at the rightness of this moment that he was determined to plow ahead. I felt somewhat less certain. On the other hand, I was totally willing to go on board. We were both led to some degree by an intuitive response to a new opportunity. So we were utterly shocked by the uproar it caused with our board, when our desire to move quickly ran headlong into the board's impulse to move cautiously and incrementally. Our one board member resigned. Damage was done to the trust that existed between the board and the executive leadership. 3 years later, however, there isn't a member of our board who would dispute the value of this program or who would argue for its elimination. So having exercised this model once, we're about to throw ourselves into it all over again. But among the things that we've learned as we've exercised our capacity to leap has been that not everybody's going to come with us. Some people are going to choose to stay on the platform. Some are going to want to just be bystanders. We've learned that different strengths become valuable in this environment. The staff member who is steady and reliable still has value to us, but the person who's willing to put themselves out on the line with a bold idea has gained heightened value. We've learned that we've got to communicate much more often and more depth with stakeholders, both to enlist their good ideas and to keep them from slowing us down. Our takeaway from all that we've learned is that we need to mirror what is best about the artists we nourish. We create an environment where change can happen. We acknowledge that having started something, we won't for a long time be at all sure of the outcome. In other words, we have to be willing to learn. We commit ourselves to being uncomfortable. We commit to valuing bold and forthright action. And we commit to rigorous self-assessment. Then we give it our best shot, and then we leap. Thank you.